Love yourself enough to set boundaries. Your time and energy are precious, and you get to decide how you use them. You teach people how to treat you by deciding what you will and won't accept. And that's a quote by Anna Taylor. So, welcome again, or for the first time, to The Profitable Photographer with me, Luci Dumas. So, today I'm diving into a topic that every photographer needs to think about and often encounters, which is, well, we can call it dealing with difficult clients. But I think as I wrote these notes and thought about it, it's more about boundaries and also accepting that people are who they are. And when we learn to set boundaries, we can discover who someone is that may not be a fit for us. And we can learn how to move on and not have it. What I see in some Facebook groups is people are devastated when they have a client that they can't please or that's challenging something or criticizing when you really don't deserve it or they don't deserve it. So, one truth that took me a while to accept as a person in business, photographing humans, is that some people are just plain difficult or untruthful or manipulative. Some are not a match with me and my personality, with how I do things. And some people are dishonest. Now, you may be like, yeah, duh, Luci. But my parents, I blame them for A, challenges I have with boundaries, and B, not being able to see that everyone doesn't always mean the best. And it's kind of hard to kind of explain that, but they didn't teach me to also look for signs when someone is maybe not someone I don't want to work with or date or marry or be a friend with, that sometimes it's a misfit, but everyone is not always coming from the best intentions. Um, I'm going to challenge myself on that. I honestly think people are coming from best intentions at all times, but maybe don't have skills, don't have, um, their way of trying to get their needs met with their best intention doesn't work for me or isn't as honest and truthful as I used to assume everyone was. I hope this makes sense. It's not, there are some people who feel like uh, everybody is kind of out to take advantage, and they might need to learn the opposite, learn how to trust. But what I'm talking about is, say, for example, there's a difficult situation with a client. Yes, I can take a look at everything I've done, but at a certain point, there are very few, but occasional people where I'm not going to be able to please them without giving away everything or putting myself at a great disadvantage. Now, I've also learned that sometimes I used to hold boundaries a little too hard. Like if someone is a challenging person and we can't come to a meeting of the minds, sometimes it's better for my own mental health and my ability to sleep at night to just refund and let them go. So I've become much more, what do I say? Much less die on a hill with some boundaries, but also much more aware that some people I'm just not going to be able to please. And it's kind of hard to talk about this because I really, first of all, I think 999 people in the world are are not who I'm talking about. But sometimes we just get people in our client base that maybe we could see the signs at the beginning, or maybe sometimes they blindside us and we think everything is great. And then out of the blue, they're critical, they're trying to get more for their money, um, all that stuff. So, oh, yeah, I don't know why this is hard to talk about, but maybe because I was raised to know that, I mean, I love people and that's why I do what I do. That's why I also coach and have a podcast because I think people are amazing. But some people, we need to just cut them loose and move on. Now, what I love about um, being self employed, and I've said this a bunch if you've listened regularly, is whatever our life challenges are, when we are self employed, we have the opportunity to heal some of that. And so, this whole boundary thing has been a big part of my personal growth. And I love the the um the we teach people how to treat us. So the first thing I always do if I'm having challenges is to see, first of all, I always look to myself, or most often, and then I think about, did I do something that allowed them to think that this would be okay? How have I taught them? I've also come up with many um, sort of things to say. And if you listened to last month's solo episode on handling objections, you can hear some of these again specifically. But some of the things that work are when they're trying to, get me to sell digitals or post an online gallery or change my prices for them. The phrase, these were the prices, or these were the policies when you booked me, and these are still the policies. So when you come up with responses that come from a strong place, a respectful place, uh, and is a boundary that they hear, then we have the opportunity to discover if these are uh, challenging people because they're just, they're trying to check in. Like sometimes when I'm buying something, I might ask if this is the best price, and I'm not being a jerk. If they say no, then I am at choice. But some people, what am I trying to say? There are some people that are um, just too difficult, and I just need to get away as soon as possible. Uh, it's tough when you've already booked somebody, but I have an example that was a big lesson to me. I had a client where everything went well and they ordered great and they wanted holiday cards. I don't give digital files, I create the cards. So we worked together. I found templates. We went back and forth. I think I even did a sample print. And at that point, after I'd spent oodles of time, she said, first of all, she didn't like the wall portrait and wanted a refund. And second, she decided she's not going to do cards after all. And uh, the refund part, I had to negotiate a little bit with that. But the cards, I had a discovery because we had mutual acquaintances. And her other acquaintance said, "Oh my gosh, those pictures you took from so and so's family were incredible. That card was just gorgeous." And, I hadn't sold her cards and I hadn't given her permission to use that image. But what happened is there was something, I might have posted it online for her to approve. And she and the card designer took my image and used it on the card. And, that's a person that, because I'd had many other challenges with her. And I just had to realize, oh my gosh, she's someone that's not truthful. She's, whatever it is, it wasn't my fault that she was so difficult. Oh, and I forgot to mention her friend that we have mutual friends said she's like that with everybody. She's very difficult and manipulative, and um, people have a hard time with her. So, uh, yeah. And I hope that helps illustrate that losing sleep, like the sooner I can notice and test whether someone is just not a match, we'll say, the better, because then I can walk away, I can say no. Um, another example, and it's like I did weddings for 10 years in the beginning of my career. So at some point, there was a wedding that um, she was, my gut said I did not want to do this one from the start. But what happened was she was looking at several people, and there was kind of a competition. And the person in me that likes to win wanted the job because I wanted to win. And it was one of the biggest nightmares, the most difficult from start to finish. And that was a huge lesson for me, because my gut, my inner self felt from the start that this is not somebody I wanted to work with. But I ignored that because I had this other agenda of wanting to be chosen. Um, I'm sure I've done that in my dating life over, you know, my lifetime. Somebody that seemed like a good catch, but really wasn't right for me. So along the way, what's so lovely is if we pay attention, we can learn those things, and then they come into our personal lives as well, and our creative lives, that we get to be more clear minded when we graduate from people pleaser to someone that is kind, is honest, is, because I know you all are, but that still sets boundaries. Now, some people might think at this point, once I learn to set the boundaries, I'm difficult. But I'm not. I'm I'm comfortable now having my policies, my needs, saying no. So, okay, what else did I want to point out on this? Let's see. So, I do love that I assume the best from everybody, and yet trust my gut, and also not get as upset as I used to if something goes south. And sometimes I'm going to say, sometimes it's probably 100% my fault. And at the same time, I don't want to beat myself up on that. And I don't want to assume that, what can I say? Um, that it's them. I always start with, what did I do? But maybe I've said this enough, but sometimes there are just people that are going to be hard to please or impossible, or are trying to take advantage of us because that's their MO, that's how they work. Okay, so here's a few strategies, and I need to make sure I'm recording. Yes, I am. Good. Okay, so whether it's managing unrealistic expectations that they have, or handling last minute changes, or navigating these tricky personalities, here's some strategies to help you stay professional and, if at all possible, make this a positive outcome. All right, so one really important thing is setting clear expectations from the start. From my first phone call with a client to the consultation and my reminder before a session. And when I sit down with them in person, I explain to them how it works. And when we sit down for consultation, I go over pricing because I personally am not comfortable with having them see pricing during the sales session. Some people do that, it works beautifully for them, but I want to go over it so that if they have sticker shock or if they say, I didn't know it was this much, I can say, I sent you home with the packet. We went over the pricing and, I can deal with it from that point. So that clear communication, and what I always go back to over and over and over is putting myself in a trusted advisor position so that they're trusting my leadership. And even if there's a confusion and they thought something was different, if they trust me and I say, this was XYZ, they're apt to believe me. And this is a point where as I'm working on establishing the leadership, if there's a strong pushback, if they try to run the show, those are warning signs for me now that this is not probably a good idea. There are a couple of exceptions. So one of the joys in my life was photographing Phil Mickelson and his family many, many times over 8 years. I think maybe 20 times. And Phil Mickelson is very leadership personality. He's in charge. And so during photo sessions, I needed to be a little less of the in charge person and accommodate what works for him because I knew his personality, and trying to push to have it my way wasn't going to work. So there are some exceptions, but in general, if they're not going with my policies and my flow, they're trying to negotiate in advance and tell me how to run my business, that's a big red flag. All right. And in my packet, I do like a folder with a ribbon and my logo sticker on it. I send them home with pricing. I send them with an agreement. Now, I don't call it a contract because I haven't had it evaluated by a lawyer to make sure that there's no red flags. So it's just an agreement that they sign in case there's any challenges that we need to litigate. That I've got their signature that they knew this was a policy. And then I have tips, a sheet with tips on how to prepare, and the policies, like the way that you see the images is in my studio or at your home from a projector on a movie screen. And that's the only time they see them, and that's when they order. That's one example. So I'm very clear. Number two, and this is something that's been really helpful in the course of my lifetime, is what's called active listening. So when somebody says something, especially if it's an objection or they're saying, no, you didn't tell me that, the first thing is to acknowledge what you heard them say. There's a there was a teacher, his name is Marshall Rosenberg, and he taught, now I can only think of it as giraffe language, nonviolent communication. One of the most powerful scripts and methods I've ever come across to help us communicate well. So sometimes if someone is not one of those, let's say 1 in 1,000 that are just going to be difficult no matter what, it may be that they just want to feel heard. And I will admit, I was much more of a defensive person early in my life. Somehow being wrong felt like a huge, like being wrong was like a devastating thing. And that's another story about my dad always being right. And um, but learning to apologize, learning to I'm trying to say, just respond back, so I can, like, somebody's like, oh, this is way more expensive than I thought it would be. To be like, okay, so here's the active listening. So you're you're kind of surprised that getting what you want was going to be at this price. And I fully understand. I have times when I want something and then it turns out it's more than I expected, and I hear you on that. So, you know, active listening and empathy are there's much more to it than just that. Okay, and we talked about this, I think, at the handling objections, but number three, because the first was set expectations, second was hearing them, and third is when an objection comes up, it's really easy to to kind of panic or get defensive, or scared or feel bad about ourselves. And the number three is to stay calm and professional. Taking a breath. The first thing I recommend with the objections is to ask a question. So I'm clear what the reason for that feeling, that need, is. Um, and taking a nice deep breath and relaxing into it is the start, because then I'm not coming from fear or defensiveness when I do that. Also, staying professional means things like we don't have to write them 15 paragraph explanation about why I don't sell digitals, or why my prices are what they are, or why I show them in my studio, or why we picked this beach, or whatever it is. I don't have to go on and on and on and defend and explain that. What I see often in some of the Facebook groups I'm in is when people have a difficult situation, they'll post their response. And so many times I think if I was that client, I would, it would not help. It would kind of fire me up even more. So keeping it simple, professional and simple and clear. Let's see. And then setting the boundaries and sticking to them. So, there's a rare occasion when I might do something that is not normally within my purview. That's a word for today. But generally, these are my policies, these are my boundaries, and when I'm firm in those, uh, they feel that. And also it gives me like a solid ground to stand on. All right. And then offer solutions and not excuses. I already mentioned the the excuses and not going on and on. Sometimes, like, there can be a little snappy answer to annoying questions, like, why do you charge so much? I might say, I love this. I don't remember who told me, but my prices are the way they are because, just like you, I want to have a good life, a nice home, savings, travel, um, and, you know, comfortable living arrangements. And so this is what I need to charge. And these are my policies in order to accomplish that. Like, let's say somebody's like, oh, there's a million people that are cheaper than you. I might also say, you know, we don't know those people's circumstances. We don't know if they're going to be around in the future. But for me, this is what I need to charge in order to have this be my full-time career and have a good life financially and also just in lifestyle. All right. Did I do all the solutions? So sometimes solutions can be a little negotiating, especially if this is one of the 999 people that, you know, I don't know, let's say they really didn't like a photograph and the way it came out once it was printed. There are solutions that fit within mine, which is let's look at other images and choose, and I'll reprint, or let's go smaller and you can use that difference as a credit for something else. So finding solutions that are still within our own needs and what feels comfortable for us. Okay, and then this is where we come to that 1000% person, which is to know when to walk away. Because not every client can be salvaged. If someone is especially disrespectful or unreasonable, it might be best to part ways. Now, it's tricky to like break up with them, and I like saying I may not be the best fit for their needs, which is different than we're not a good fit. We're not a good fit can make them feel like there's something wrong with them. And I had a situation where I told somebody that uh, because there was red flags, the whole field was red, and she went to every vendor at the bridal show and badmouthed me. And she badmouthed me to the person that had referred me, which is a photographer that traditionally I get like 5 weddings a year referred by him because it was mutual. And so I learned that when people are very, very difficult, we want to be careful about how we break up with them. So, and I'm not someone that would routinely just make up an untruth. My parents would call it a story. The other word is a lie. But so I would not say I'm already booked for that date. Um, but I might say I'm not available for this job with you because that is a truth that I'm not available. And if they're like, well, when are you available? Then we gotta like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna say now? Um, but overall, in general, not taking on a client, I'm not going to say, white lies to me are something I try to avoid as much as possible, unless like if they're super difficult and like that person, it might have been a good bet to just go ahead and accept that the best thing to do is to say, I've already booked that date and not tangle up. So I hope this is helpful. The core of where this came from, and what I wanted to convey to you is that we don't have to be devastated by something not going right. And one of my favorite books is The Four Agreements with not Neil, Don Miguel Ruiz. I do have 2 episodes reviewing that book and how it applies to business. And one of the 4 agreements is don't take anything personally. So when a challenge comes up, we can look at our responsibility, but we can also know that whatever's going on for them is at the core not about us. If somebody's really upset and furious because I was 10 minutes late, there's something in them that has created that much lack of well, I don't know, what kindness, acceptance. And because most people would be, if I was like, yeah, I got a flat tire or something, would, instead of making us really bad and wrong, would be understanding. So that is the core of what I wanted to share today. And in conclusion, difficult clients are part of the job. If we're going to be meeting people and working for them, and I just didn't realize this would happen, but there's going to be people where we're not a good match. And when you've got strategies in place, and also the growing self-esteem, being able to accept that we can't please everybody, accept that maybe sometimes we make mistakes, that, it's just a great life lesson, and it's a great way to walk through life. So I hope you found this to be helpful. I really, really love that y'all are still listening, and you can get in touch with me, LuciDumasCoaching.com, Lucy with an I. Um, I decided to check with my television, my smart TV. There's a voice activation on my remote. And I said just my name to see what would come up. And YouTube showed up with all my 100 episodes and about 15 or 20 episodes that I've been a guest on. So if you ever miss me or you just want to watch on a bigger format, you can go to YouTube and you can find the recordings. But if you're washing dishes, you can tune into a podcast platform or Lucy Dumas Coaching. And feel free to set up a 20-minute call if you want to chat about anything related to your business, your photography, how to set boundaries. I love having a chat. No pressure on that. It's not. Now, sure, if you like the conversation and you're thinking coaching might be in order, I'm happy to open up a different um, a different day to you to talk about that. But this is just a way that I can support you, because that's why I do this. All right, that's it for today, and have a great week or month or photo shoot, whatever you are up to. Bye for now.